All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this discussion about the College of Staten Island's successful migration from Drupal 7. We're excited to share how we navigated the challenges of delivering a targeted visual redesign, including how we gained stakeholder buy-in, budget approval, and managed expectations of the redesigned site and future optimizations. We plan to have some time at the end for questions, but please add them in the chat as you had them throughout the presentation. With that, let's dive right in. I'm Emily Becker. I'm a Senior Strategic Account Manager at Jacala, formerly known as FFW. My role as a Strategic Account Manager is primarily to make sure that our clients are very happy with our services, that we're strategically aligned with their objectives, and that they continue to partner with us. Mandy, I'll kick it to you next, and then we'll go through introductions for the rest of the College of Staten Island team, and then we'll dive right into the webinar content.
Awesome. So hi, I'm Mandy Englert. I've been with Jacala for 2 years now as a senior solutions consultant, mostly focused on our higher education clients. And Patty, I'll pass to you.
Thank you, Mandy. My name is Patty Kahn, and I am the Chief Information Officer at the College of Staten Island, CUNY. I've been on this role for 10 years, and one of the initiatives that we did work on was this redesign of our website. And I work very closely with my team, and I'm going to ask Joyce Taylor to kick it off.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Patty. Hi, I'm Joyce Taylor. I am the Director of Application and Web Development. I've been working with the college at the College of Staten Island for actually 40 years. When I started here, there was no such thing as an internet. We had no web page, so I've seen a lot of changes in my time here. The next person I'd like to introduce is Roman Lavrov.
Hi, thank you, Joyce. My name is Roman Lavrov. I am a programmer here at CSI for the last 10 years, and I've been involved in several projects with Jacala, the Drupal 7 to Drupal 9 migration. We had an earlier project where we were focused on fixing the site accessibility, and our most recent project that we just completed, we did a homepage redesign and a refresh of the site navigation system, and we'll be sharing all that with you today. And I'm going to introduce my colleague, Matthew Gans.
Thanks, Roman. My name is Matthew Gans. I've been working here at the College of Staten Island for almost 20 years now. And like Roman, I've been helping on the D7 to D9 project conversion, as well as the accessibility conversion. And most recently, this past November, the Drupal 10 refresh of the homepage navigation.
And Patty, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about the College of Staten Island, if we want to bounce to the next slide.
I think I was going to be taking this slide.
Oh, thank you.
Sure,
Thank you.
Emily. Okay, so at the college, we have a pretty nice size population. We have undergraduates, 97, 86. These are our numbers as of last fall. So we're hoping, our enrollment will continue to go up. Our graduates, we have 950, and faculty, full-time and part-time, are 862. Individuals. We have a very small team that manages the website as well as develop online applications. It's comprised of myself as the director and 4 application developers, Sabrina Feekness, Matthew Gans, who you've met, Maria Gershkovich, and Roman Lavrov. We've all worked on all of the projects that we've worked with Jacala and managed the website every day.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thanks.
And now for who Jacala is. So Jacala North America, formerly known as FFW for many of you on the call, we're simultaneously a consulting firm, a technology company, and a digital agency with deep specialization in data and AI. We collaborate to empower many of the world's largest brands and higher ed institutions to turn data into meaningful experiences by helping them to understand exactly what their audiences want and when they want it, accelerating them forward to higher levels of success. We are spread out through the world. Over 11 countries are represented by our employees, and we have over 800 full-time employees. Going into the next slide here, and before we get into the meat of the presentation, I want to go through some common redesign challenges that you all might be facing or that you're familiar with in your organization. So while a Drupal 7 upgrade is something that we hear about, especially a lot lately with end of life, there are several articles out there speaking to how we get it done, but what we rarely see are the challenges that face many website owners and how they plan for them before getting into the project. Going to the next slide, when we talk about a redesign and the decision that goes with it, it typically starts with content owners, marketers saying, I need a new website, I want a new website, I need a new component, and they need it as soon as possible. So these kind of conversations can be really challenging to have because that individual stakeholder, while what they want is probably necessary for their content, it might not be specifically on brand. It might not fit what is currently offered by the website or tech stack. And there might not be the support to get that work completed because many institutions are resource constrained. There also may be similar conversations with other stakeholder groups about their also very specific needs, even though they're facing similar challenges. So how do we bring all of that together and successfully get to a redesign project? So typically when we're looking at redesign priorities, things like brand and marketing consistency, outdated design, navigation experience, all of those things will come up. These are all reasons that we hear when our clients are fighting for budget and resources to help with the redesign. So how do you bring all of these priorities together into one cohesive plan for a redesigned website? And how do you build a case for the budget and resources to address them? How do you create urgency? And that's what we'll talk about today. So going to the next slide, Drupal 7 end of life was announced, so that creates some urgency. And I know that this announcement came years ago. It's not exactly news right now, but we still see higher education professionals struggling to get the resources that they need for the upgrade. Now, we see many of our clients faced with not only the pressure for those redesign priorities, but also large structural changes to the platform to keep the website secure and using modern technology. You don't want to reinvest in a platform and have similar issues with it years down the line. So many stakeholders of websites have trouble understanding why this change is so foundational and why it takes time and resources to accomplish. Mandy, going to kick it over to you here. Could you go through some of the reasons why this Drupal 7 end of life requires this extensive time and effort?
Yeah, totally. So actually, if we go to the next slide, so taking a step back and sort of looking at that evolution of Drupal, the reason the original release cycle planning became unattainable becomes a lot more clear. So D8 represents a second break in Drupal's life cycle to keep it in line with the overall market and some of the current trends that we're seeing. So this was really a time where Drupal needed to be seen as a framework, and it really started to stress the adoption of modern technology and trends to make sure that you aren't being locked into a specific vendor or specific product, as we've seen web presences really begin to scale and other products sort of hitting the market. So if we go to the next slide, this evolution has become a pretty robust restructure and replatform of, that current web presence, and the upgrade comes with some major benefits built on that modern infrastructure. And that's what really keeps Drupal still pretty competitive and still a clear choice for many higher education institutions to continue investing their resources in. So this change is foundational, but it does make a lot of sense given how we see CMS management change over a lot of years. So Drupal 7 did not have the newer versions of PHP in its core architecture. So that's something that is included with D8 plus. Also, the adoption of Symfony for its framework has really encouraged best practices in modern web development, including having that standardized API available. So this made it a lot easier for developers familiar with modern PHP frameworks to be able to work with Drupal without that terrible learning curve that comes with that new CMS, and leading to more consistent and predictable development experiences. And lastly, the tweak templating. This is something that we'll definitely talk about a lot today. And that's really included to reduce the complexity of the Drupal 7 themes that we used to see. And this allows web owners to really scale that design and bring it in line with a lot of modern front-end development approaches, allowing a lot of different organizations to avoid major re-platforms built from the ground up after they sort of hit some of these more modern frameworks. And then let's go one more slide here. So lastly, the upgrade prioritized a shift towards more flexible, robust modules rather than inventing every piece of functionality from scratch. That's really what we were seeing in the Drupal community around Drupal 7. There were so many different functionalities and so many things invented from scratch. And these are all factors that website owners should really be considering when moving from Drupal 7. A lot of those things are outdated. The security hasn't been upgraded. So moving into these more robust and foundational frameworks that we're moving to with Drupal 8, 9, 10, soon to be 11, these are the things that we're really seeing is going towards Drupal core and using some of those key contributed modules. And the upgrade path is challenging, but with a priority to move, it's really the time to evaluate some of these factors and how you want your website to continue scaling for years to come. So College of Staten Island team, when you were evaluating your options, what were some of the questions you were asking? And I'm actually going to hand it over to Joyce to speak to some of these reasons why the team decided to stick with Drupal. And Ashley, can you go to the next slide? And Joyce, I'm sorry, you're muted.
So I keep muting myself. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay. The bottom line is that CSA wanted the upgrade to address security vulnerability, maintain ADA compliance, and to refresh modules and code-based standards for future compatibility with upgrades and patches. Prior to going to Drupal for our first implementation, which was over 7 years ago, we looked at WordPress and Joomla, and we found that Drupal provided a much more secure and robust enterprise CMS. When we did the upgrade from 7 to 9, since Drupal was our current CMS, the transition for the developers would be easier and somewhat seamless. There would be a much smaller learning curve. We were also happy, we were happy with the product, and we were also, and still are, using Acquia to house the site, and Acquia has a very strong Drupal experience. Also, we were very satisfied with Jacala's knowledge and support, so the decision to stay with Drupal and engage Jacala was actually a very easy one for us. As Mandy mentioned, the new model provided a blank template where we could easily use various components to effortlessly develop pages. This is all going to be discussed a bit more later on with when Matthew and Roman do their presentation. Since Jacala was already familiar with our site from our first contract, it would take them less time to get up to speed. Less discovery hours were going to be needed, which helped with the cost. Jacala started working immediately because of their familiarity, and we were ready to, start working immediately. Thank you. Now, Emily?
Yeah, thanks, Joyce. So now you had reached the point where you chose Drupal to move forward with. So now let's move into trying to understand how you were able to get buy-in from stakeholders for that upgrade. I know that this topic is one that we get questions about all the time, how to get leadership buy-in, how to get stakeholders on board with such a foundational move. And I think the College of Staten Island team, you all did an incredible job getting your many stakeholders on board with leadership support for such a foundational change that was going to take resources and budget to be able to get done. So let's dive into how you were able to get that buy-in. And from here, I'll kick it over to Patty.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah, you are correct. Getting buy-in was real important, and that was a large component of my role on this project. Communication was big. And I don't mean communication just to key stakeholders, but also communication to the entire college at large, but also communication internally as well with the team. Obviously, security was a big component of this, which was why we did the upgrade. And we spoke to how there were vulnerabilities that other CUNY schools had to address, which we were going to address through this project. And not only CUNY schools, but New Jersey schools as well. Obviously, the ADA compliance was a big element of speaking to leadership and explaining as to why this had to happen. But I go back to not only the security and ADA, but also usability and flexibility. Everybody knew that the design had to happen where we wanted to be able to adapt to the user's needs. And this was just the right time. And to be able to modify and make changes and adapt to users' requests was key. So how do we do all this? We spoke with cabinet, we spoke with deans, I spoke with chairs. We had surveys where we had actual data which spoke to what are some of the challenges that our current website has and what can this new design address. And again, we also leveraged Jacala, where they actually did presentations to our team, to cabinet and also members of the web steering team, because they had a way of providing information in a little bit more fluid manner. This way, the college at large can have a better understanding of what this whole project was about. So it definitely was a team effort between Jacala, between my team, between the college at large. And obviously, it was a successful one because of that. Next slide.
Okay.
Right. So one of the biggest limitations that we had with our Drupal 7 site was its rigidity. In Drupal 7, our content editors were kind of locked into entering content into these fixed templates, which meant that they didn't really have a way to modify the page layout or customize the order of the page components. This was a pretty significant drawback, and it was one that we told the stakeholders that would be addressed as part of the Drupal 7 to Drupal 9 update. So during that upgrade, the Jacala team transitioned the site to feature a modular widget-based structure for page building. They did that using the paragraphs module. And then this new approach allowed us and our content editors this new degree of flexibility. So they were now able to dynamically configure components on individual pages, structure each page around the content instead of trying to build the content to fit the page or to fit those templates. And additionally, each one of those components was designed and styled to match CSI's visual identity. Having those components be modular meant that it's much easier now to make aesthetic changes in those localized areas where it was needed. Post-launch, Jacala provided comprehensive training and support to our team. So they really took the time to make sure that we were comfortable with the new system and the new workflows. They shared the best practices for site upkeep and code-based maintenance. And all of that has really been invaluable to us in terms of like self-sufficiency, performing in-house upgrades, building out new features, and just general day-to-day like site maintenance tasks. So big thank you to them for all the support that they provided.
Thanks, Roman. If we want to go to the next slide. All right, so all of this pre-planning and getting support from leadership went a long way into enabling us to stay focused on the goals of the project and creating a system that was able to scale. Some of these goals, like reducing risks of security vulnerabilities, the usability and flexibility of the new design system, and making sure that the site was ADA compliant. So Mandy, can you speak to how we looked at all of those priorities and goals with the CSI team to help them create the platform that they needed now that they had the buy-in?
Yeah, of course. So with a strong goal around security and scalability, in order to make sure that we were creating a sustainable architecture that was created to scale, reduce the risk of these vulnerabilities, we wanted to leverage Drupal core as much as possible to allow for stronger extensibility, while only a small portion of the website would be a mix of specific products and some custom development. And while this is a best practice for creating Drupal infrastructures today, we were able to be really transparent with the College of Staten Island team and work with them on the specifics on how to create this stable and secure environment, making sure that we were using the right products so that they would be able to upgrade the things when needed and move towards those key contributions to find cost efficiencies and an upgrade path overall. So on the next slide, so for that flexibility and that usability piece, I think, Roman, you actually did a really great job of explaining some of the technical approach that we took there. And so by understanding the goals around flexibility and how we can make the authoring experience more sustainable, we really relied heavily on Drupal best practices and then the object-oriented architecture. So for many of our clients, budget and post-launch maintenance are often areas of concern. So our goal is to take a really strategic approach on how we're breaking up the templates and how we're breaking up each individual component so that we can build that reusability into the platform from the start. And this project was really no different from that perspective. We wanted to make sure that these changes were very foundational to just make it easier to add on to in the future and continue to just kind of move forward with that design and starting with that system. And while we didn't produce a full redesign for the project, we did refresh a lot of the site templates. We eliminated many of the templates and updated to use component-based structures to allow for more flexibility for changes. And this modularity makes it a lot easier to understand, develop, test, and maintain the code. So changes in one part of their Drupal system can often be made with minimal impact to other parts of the system, allowing the small team to really maintain the entire website and better address some of the stakeholder concerns as they arise. And let's go to the next slide. So lastly, but definitely one of the most significant goals, I feel like, was around the ADA compliance and just making sure that we were creating a website that was really inclusive to users. Accessibility is a requirement for all higher education and certainly for College of Staten Island. And it's so foundational to the way that we actually design and code these types of websites. So it was really a great pairing between our two teams, really being able to prioritize this. And for maintainability, we wanted to be sure that the accessibility was not just an added feature, but really become foundational to the platform. So this being a really strong goal for the CSI team allowed us to modify and refresh the design to meet that ADA compliance and meet those requirements in a way that didn't just meet the launch goals and these short-term goals, but allow them to maintain that compliance over time as well. So through the authoring environment, but also through that front-end process. And so through the upgrade process, we provided some out-of-the-box tools from Drupal to help that piece of it, but also other modifications and resources to make accessible experiences really the standard here, and how content should really be added to the site over time, knowing that things like alt text and things like that can sometimes be missed. We want to make those things required. So these are all things that we were able to kind of add to the platform to make sure that we were meeting those goals. And I'm actually going to pass it to Emily to really talk about some of our road mapping.
Yeah. So for most, if not all, Drupal upgrade projects, we often like to work with our stakeholders to provide an incremental roadmap that prioritizes some post-launch features and optimizations. Typically, when you're working with a large group of stakeholders and having a lot of feelings involved, you aren't able to accomplish maybe everything in an initial launch. But we noticed that with the priorities being so focused on foundational elements, sometimes institutions aren't able to prioritize some of those and they would like to in the initial build. So we'll look for ways with the internal team to track routine maintenance patches to keep the system up to date, ways that they can create efficiencies for SEO or accessibility or analytics best practices that leave more time for new design features that excite their internal stakeholders. Having the College of Staten Island team in the process of the build all the way through helped keep them up to date with where the platform was and how it could be optimized and refined while they were maintaining it post-launch. If we go into the next slide, we've been kind of reiterating this in many different ways throughout the webinar, but overall, this was a hugely successful migration for Jacala and the College of Staten Island. Much due to planning, but also the use of the flexible design system and scalable architecture. With all of the planning, and Joyce will speak further to how they organized all of the communications with stakeholders in a bit, The teams felt prepared and informed about the project so that the Jacala and Staten Island teams could stay focused on the technical migration process. The flexible design allowed for future optimization, which we'll talk about next, and templates that can't fit the needs of all the website, but new components were created, general page content types and flexible containers were created to help give those content owners the ability to create engaging layouts without being boxed into pre-made layouts. Finally, the foundation of the platform, the scalable architecture, set ourselves up to more easily move to later versions of PHP compatibility, as Mandy mentioned, with a new ecosystem, managing upgrades and patches. The contributed modules wouldn't have been easily usable or optimized. So as Mandy mentioned, we made an effort to look at more of those contributed modules. So now we go on to optimization, speaking of the roadmap. So we had a successful migration, so we're done, right? No, that's not the end. Just because we upgraded doesn't mean that we're finished with our work. As you all know, optimization is a very important part to any website that is continuing to scale. Mandy, back to you. Can you talk about some of the recommendations and priorities that we had around optimization for post-launch?
Sure. So in these new foundational architectures that allow you to continue to scale, we highly recommend keeping time and resources for optimizations along the way. And some of the practices that we recommend when organizations are trying to create the optimization mindset internally are some of the things that I've listed here. So things like site activity monitoring, so monitoring your site speed, usage, things like that, collecting user feedback, encouraging innovation, just with your team, staying up to date with the latest trends, and always highlighting wins. That's always a big one. It makes everyone feel good, and sharing those insights. These can really be important for just getting that support internally and keeping people under that impression, just so everyone knows that this is an important piece of work. It's something that has to continue to be evolved, and continue to be funded, and so on and so forth. So it's definitely an important thing that we really try to push in a lot of these projects. And the College of Staten Island team, after launching their Drupal 7 upgrade, kept up with that optimization quite a bit and had a very intriguing project that could really start to move the needle for the user experience. So Matt, actually, could you speak to some of that on the next slide?
Thanks, Mandy. As you've seen, Drupal is always evolving. And as such, this past November, CSI completed an internal upgrade to move from Drupal 9 to Drupal 10, which is the most current release. Although Drupal 11 is actually coming within the next few weeks, so be on the lookout. Although the upgrade from Drupal 7 to Drupal 9 did change some of the aesthetics of the homepage, the real focus was on the ADA, the end-of-life issues with Drupal 7, and the other security and vulnerability issues that we've talked about previously. As such, we decided to undertake a limited refresh of both the navigation and the homepage that began this past November. The impetus for this refresh came from our user community, who had long expressed concerns about the main navigation being cluttered, having a difficult time in locating certain pages and items. On the technical side, the module that we were using for our navigation was already quite dated. We had patched it several times already to account for accessibility and other issues. We had concerns about its scalability and issues that had cropped up during the move to Drupal 10 related to the underlying PHP upgrades that happened at the same time. Another concern was the overall homepage design. Although during Drupal 7 to Drupal 9, the content pages were updated to be more flexible, the homepage design was still somewhat rigid. Many of the components simply weren't flexible enough to redesign without significant changes. And after meeting with the key stakeholders, a decision was made to pursue a limited refresh to address both of the above issues. Although we had several budgetary constraints, we were again able to contract with Jacala, who provided their expertise in meeting these challenges. To begin, we started with a kickoff meeting to begin the navigation research. During the initial discovery phase, Jacala found the navigation on our site had over 200 links, including nearly 30 that were redundant. It was also discovered that the college search page was heavily trafficked, seemingly indicating difficulty in using the main navigation to locate content. The navigation headings were also somewhat disjointed from their underlying categories. owing to the fact that the original navigation in Drupal 7 was more organizationally designed. And as departments tended to move from one area to the next, the navigation became out of sync with respect to where the content actually was. Following discovery, a new navigation structure was proposed by Jacala, which then underwent several stages of testing by both CSI and the larger user community. The first of which was card sorting. Card sorting allowed users to group and stack navigation items into categories that they could then name. The goal of this phase was to ensure that the underlying navigation items were grouped in a more cohesive manner that spoke to their respective audiences. 3 cohorts, consisting of faculty and staff, CSI students, and external college stakeholders, were provided a link to an interactive platform which allowed them to sort and aggregate the navigational items in the new proposed design. The results of the sorting were aggregated to build a result set showing the commonalities and how items were grouped by each set of participants. Following this exercise, the web team again reviewed the data with Jacala, and we made several tweaks to the navigation based on the data that we received. To ensure that the new navigation groupings made sense, a second round of testing using tree sorting was conducted. We used the same 3 cohorts as the first round of testing, but selected different individual members to make up these groups. Tree sorting presents users with a set of challenge questions designed to have the user navigate to a predefined goal page. Users were provided a link to an interactive website that had a mock-up of the new proposed navigation. They would see a question and then be instructed to click through the navigation and select the page that they thought contained the answer to that question. The pathing that they took through the navigation was recorded and then tallied to show an aggregate percentage of users who reached the goal page. Another round of review followed, and we made a few additional changes based on the additional round of feedback to arrive at the finalized navigation. When the design phase began, the decision was made to restructure the menu using the core Drupal menu system and to move away from the antiquated module that we had been previously using. Jacala provided designs. We made several tweaks to include updated logos and branding items in both the headers and the footer. As for the body of the homepage, Jacala provided 5 different wireframe proposals, which were reviewed by both the CSI web team and our key stakeholders. Ultimately, elements of several different wireframes were chosen and then combined into a final composite, which was provided along with a mobile version of the wireframe. These updates provided us with a new refreshed homepage design, as well as several new components that were much more flexible. Overall, we are now able to provide much more flexibility, which allows us to showcase the campus as students engage with our college homepage. And on our next slide, Joyce will be talking about some of the communications and key stakeholders and how they were brought in at the very beginning of our project. Joyce?
Thank you, Matt. Okay. As Emily mentioned, communication is vital in these types of projects. It's always been very difficult to get content for our homepage, to keep it dynamic. One major complaint from our users, the user community, was that there was a lot going on at the college. We had faculty research, student and institutional awards, important events, but none of this was being communicated. So we knew that it was important to include this information as part of the redesign. And as far as the communication, while we had web steering committee and we had stakeholder committees, and as Patty mentioned, we spoke with the upper administration, we brought 2 people in right from the start and included them in all of our meetings with Jacala. We included the director of communications and marketing, as well as the director of enrollment and admissions. And this was a significant decision because it really helped us in the long run. We made their content prominent on the homepage as the user community suggested. Instead of IT being the one making these decisions and content decisions, we would turn to them. They now had a major stake in the project, so they really got involved. Also, a very helpful communication tactic was having Jacala, provide many presentations to all of our committees. And, in the past, we would do them, but having Jacala join us was very effective. They did presentations to the web steering committee, stakeholder groups, as Patty discussed. The upper administration was included in these, presentations. And as we were working weekly, we would send out updates, keeping all these groups informed. And we also sent the wireframes that were provided for their feedback as well. So, we took in their feedback, we shared it, with everyone, and that's pretty much how the decision making was done. Now that we are live, something that's very helpful, we need to keep the homepage dynamic and keep getting this content. So I was asked to join the College Communications Committee, and now being part of that committee, the homepage, is on their agenda at these meetings that we have every 2 weeks. So keeping everybody closely involved with the content has been very good. The committee also developed a calendar for making updates to the homepage in advance so that we are not scrambling around and trying to, find content rather. This is very helpful too, because now we're able to plan in advance, what does the college want to be focusing on, in the middle of September, what's happening in October, and by having these prearranged calendars, it's very effective. So the next, I think I'd like to hand over to Patty so she can talk a little bit more about, the results that we were able to get.
Was it successful? That's the key.
Yes.
I have to say throughout the process, we were always back and forth saying, is this going to pull, are we going to be able to pull this off? Because as you know, working with the college community can sometimes be tough. Everybody has their own thoughts and ideas on how they want this to be, but having a great partner with Jacala allowed us to get through the process. There were lots of communication, lots of flexibility, lots of show and tell, lots of this. I mean, we spoke about the tree exercise and the card sorting. That was huge. And that really allowed for the community to become involved and have an understanding of what this project is about. They understood, oh, that's why you're not going to be on the top of the menu. That's why we're going to move you down. So there was key involvement by all parties. I also want to point out that you can't do everything at once. There has to be you have to be flexible, but you also have to be realistic, and you have to stay within your budget. It required a lot of patience. But with the launch, I have to say that we did receive lots of accolades from many of our college community constituents, some of which is on this screen. I anticipate in the fall semester that we should be getting more accolades because we went live at the end of the spring semester. So as you know, the college was more involved with finals and end of the semester things that were going on. So I'm excited about this new look and feel. Positive feedback all along, and hopefully we will continue with this momentum as we continue to make the changes that this new environment will allow us to do. So thank you, Jacala. Thank you to my team.
Thanks, Patty. It's amazing to see what your small but mighty team was able to accomplish, especially when you consider all of the communication aspects that go into this, because that's very heavily involved, but it's so wonderful to see how that brought success throughout the journey. So huge kudos to the College of Staten Island team for undertaking this effort so successfully. We've taken you through the planning process, the upgrade project, as well as given insights into ongoing optimization by the College of Staten Island team of their Drupal site, allowing them the flexibility they and their various stakeholders need from the platform. So I think we have some time here from questions from the audience. So I'd like to open it up a bit. Ashley, do you want to help us moderate with some of that?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
So as we jump into questions, I do want to note you do have the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Of course, if you do have further questions outside of what we're able to cover today, I'm going to be sending the Contact Us link for Jacala. We're more than happy to discuss more detail about your project or any further questions there. But kicking off with some great questions that have come in, thank you for those. One of our questions is, to what extent could content migration be automated versus manually curated? And if you're able to largely automate the data migration, Can you talk a little bit about how you achieved that successfully? I'll hand over to our lovely experts here to answer your question.
I can speak a little bit to that. So Drupal used a module called Migrate. They wrote a bunch of customized scripts to map the content from that old model to like the new widgets in the paragraph type widgets. I'd say maybe 90% of the migration then was automated using their custom scripts. There was maybe a little bit of tweaking that we had to do once those scripts ran in the final version. And there was like a content type that we didn't create a script for. It was about 30 pages maybe that we manually migrated. So overall, it was like 90–95% that was automated, a little bit of checking afterwards, but the majority of it was, yeah, automated.
Yeah, we had to move some, as Roman mentioned, we did some checking afterwards. Sometimes we had to move some of the content that got a little shifted in the template, so we would, move that, but it was, the majority was automated.
Wonderful. And I think this next question ties into that very easily. Were there any impacts to the website's functionality or content during the upgrade? If so, how was the downtime or correction mitigated?
I can't really say, Matt, I'll let you see if you want to answer it. I really, off the top of my head, can't say there was much in the way of downtime at all, because actually for Go Live, it was done pretty much in the middle of the, of the night type of thing.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Matt.
The actual development process was done on, we have a setup where we have a development server, we have a staging server, and then we have our live production instance, which is all hosted by Acquia. Primary development was done on the development server at that time. And so we kind of kept things isolated away from production. So production just sort of continued as normal. Users continued to make content updates. We continued to do basic site maintenance while the development and upgrade from D7 to D9 was going on the dev side. And when we were ready to go live, we had, just a brief switch over from dev to staging to do, another round of testing. And as Joyce mentioned, I think the go live was something like 4 o'clock in the morning or something like that. There was probably a brief downtime, maybe 20 or 30 minutes while the databases were upgraded and everything brought over. But that was pretty much it. It was a very seamless process.
Yeah, the only thing we did stop maybe a week before go live was the users updating their pages, because we didn't want to lose anything, as we were doing the shift over. So that was the, I'd say the biggest, and it really wasn't, major at all, especially considering the amount of, work that was getting done. So that we put that on hold and, just kept track of those few updates that we needed to be processed after we went live.
Perfect, thank you. This is a little bit more in the early stages of the project, but someone was asking about the research activities you conducted ahead of taking this on. So which activities brought the most value? In other words, if you could only do 1 to 2 activities for your user research, which ones would you continue to invest in future projects or adjust in this one?
Yeah, I can probably start this, and then Joyce, you can probably finish it from the college perspective. But from a discovery perspective, unfortunately, it's not a super easy answer, because it usually kind of depends on what the challenges are. So normally we'll sort of recommend a mix depending what the challenge is. So in this project, the challenge was very focused on the navigation, which is why we picked tree testing and card sorting, because those 2 activities would really hyper focus on that information architecture. For other projects, we've noticed, especially when we need to get a lot of stakeholder buy-in, we'll start with like one-on-one interviews or like a moderated usability test, so that we can really try to understand how people are using the site and how stakeholders are looking at the site as well. So those type of activities can be super helpful too. But again, it really depends on the redesign challenges and what your goals are. And that's usually how we'll recommend a specific like user research mix. And then Joyce, I wasn't sure if there was anything you wanted to add to that, just for your project.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with Mandy, and I think the most helpful were those, those surveys, the card sorting and tree, the mapping, basically because when when you try to explain to the user community why they should not be on the homepage or why navigation should be the way it is, you need to be able to defend what you're saying. And by having all those statistics, and they also, looked at the Google Analytics, that helped get buy-in from the user community. In the past, that was always a major problem because as you can tell from what Matt said, we had 200 links on our prior homepage, 30 of them were duplicates because everybody wants their link on the homepage, which, us just telling them that, no, this is not the way to go, having data to back it up, and having the company as well, having Jacala explain to them, not just us explain to them, but what the best practices are, and that would be something that's really important.
Can I also add, Jacala was great at providing samples of websites from other higher ed institutions, which kind of got the whole process started. And using that as a baseline then led us to the different wireframes that was very helpful as well. So I think it was like a combination of all of those tools. And I can't speak enough to the relationship that we had and the flexibility that they provided us, because working with our college constituents can sometimes be challenging because, they want to be at the top of the screen and they want to be that first button. And so having that ability to, leverage all of that was very helpful.
Wonderful. And you answered one of the next questions, actually, I believe, within that last one. So thank you. But just to see if the team wants to add anything else too, is when you are getting buy-in from leadership and people across organizations, how did you manage, unhelpful feedback or unengaged stakeholders? So any insight there?
So I'll start. I would often receive lots of communication from stakeholders, but before I responded, I was quick to meet with my team and say, let's word this in such a way, because we don't want to become on the defensive. We want to get their support, and we want to say, hey, what you're saying, we get it, we understand where you're coming from. But in the same time, we want to be able to say, but how does this sound to you? So I think it's important that you come across not being defensive, but stick to the facts and explain what, we're not the experts. Jacala is the experts, and they're not going to steer us in the wrong direction. And what you're proposing is not going to work, and this is why. So I think it's very, very important that, lots of communication went out to those constituents that emailed me privately or emailed my team privately. And we were very detailed in our explanation, because we did not want to put anybody on the defensive, which was very, very important in the success of this project.
Yeah, I think, Patty said it all: communication, communication, and communication.
Wonderful. And since we are coming up on time and we want to be respectful for everyone who has joined us today, I think this is a great closing question. And that is, what is one thing you wish you knew, or one piece of advice you would give someone starting this project that would help their route and their future endeavors with a similar success of you guys?
Don't try to do everything at once. Be focused in what you're trying to do, because as you start receiving input from the community, there's going to be a lot of different directions that you can go to. You can't satisfy everyone. Stick to your plan and stay focused.
And as well, stay organized. You do get a lot of very good documentation from Jacala, which is helpful. So that helps you focus. We had very specific timelines, so you have to really be ready to follow the timelines, because they're the experts.
Well, thank you all for joining today. Again, I did drop the contact us link in the chat. So if you have further questions that you'd love our support in answering, if you're exploring a project very similar to this, Jacala and the entire team here is happy to help. And we hope today has been helpful with any projects you're taking on in the future. Thank you all for joining.